All right. Hey everyone, as you're all joining. Basically, we're gonna keep going with advanced math topics today. Um, so some more of those exponential functions, that kind of stuff. Tomorrow, both lessons are gonna be about problem solving and data analysis, mainly because I know that's the last topic that if you guys are in the in-person class, that's the last thing you guys did. So, just making sure we cover everything for that. All right, so we're going to keep going with advanced math today, but what I wanted to do first was work on this one problem from yesterday that we didn't get to see and didn't get to work on. So this is the problem that I wanted to start with today, and then we'll jump into those other advanced math topics. But I'll give you guys a few seconds to look at this problem, and then we'll talk about how to solve it, how to go about it, like what I would do, what you guys would do, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so something like this, like how do we think we'd approach it? What would we do? How do we think we could get to the answer the fastest with something like this? And if anybody has any ideas, you can always do the raise hand thing, and then all right. So let's attempt doing this with Desmos, mainly because once they start talking about a graph transformation, it's most likely easiest that we view it in Desmos and then, we do whatever the transformation is and try to work from there. So I'm going to share to the Desmos calculator. Um, all right. And then we would have the f of x, which is y, same thing, y is equal to x minus 6, x plus 6, and then x minus 2. So this is what it looks like. It's kind of, it's going up like pretty high. And then the problem was asking us to solve for g of 0. What does that mean? Well, actually, reverse. They tell us that the graph that we're actually looking for is 4 units higher than this one. But if they're saying g of 0, like what can I look for on this graph, which is the graph of f of x? Like to find g of 0, like how can I find it using this graph? Also, if you've just joined, can you just put your first and last name in for attendance into the chat box? All right, yeah, Steven saying where x is equal to 0. Yeah, so whenever like a function is written in that way, f of something, g of something, etc., the number inside the parentheses is just yes. Okay, someone also is sending it to me as a DM, like how to get the answer. So yeah, whenever it's f of something, g of something, the thing in parentheses is our value for x. So if they're saying g of 0 or f of 0, they want to know what's the value at the y-intercept. So luckily for us, Desmos is really nice. It shows us the y-intercept. It's 0, 72. But the problem that we want to do is translating the graph up 4 units. So if we are moving a graph up 4 units, then we're just increasing whatever that y value is by 4. So we're doing 72 plus 4, we're going to get 76. What about if they said we're translating the graph, let's say, let me just make sure I'm going to say the right thing. Let's say they said they're translating the graph 2 units to the left. What would the value of g of 0 be then? If we're translating the graph 2 units to the left. Yeah, Faying, can you explain like how you got like that answer that you just sent me?
You identify the when the x equals to 2, which is equal to 0. So that means that when you shift 2 units to the left for gx, that will also shift the x value to the left. That will be just 0.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're moving this 2 units to the left, we're moving it this direction. So we'd be looking at f of 2 is the same thing as saying g of 0 in that case. So awesome job with that. Let me share it back to my iPad so we can get started with all this stuff for today. So this was the question from yesterday that we were just like going back and looking at. So let's keep going with the advanced math day 2 topics. So mainly like exponential stuff, graphing, translations, and those types of ideas. So this should look familiar if you guys are in the in-person class at Midwood. Exponent rules. So all of these are just good to know. Again, if you want access to any of these PowerPoints, I can share them with you. Just send me an email. It's marley@wagnerprep.com. I'll put this in the chat box too, probably towards the end. So if you guys do want access to any of these PowerPoints, I could share the Google Drive with you. So these are all our exponent rules. Pretty important for us to know. Yeah, like these would have to be memorized. Most important ones are definitely our product rule, our quotient rule. What is it? Power of a power, and dealing with fractional exponents. So that's when we're dealing with our radicals and all that kind of stuff when we're taking like a cubed root. So this is what we were talking about a little bit yesterday too, like with our roots. So this is just an example where we can simplify to get one of these answer choices. I'll give you guys about like 2 minutes to try and simplify this, choosing an answer. When you have an answer, send it to me in the chat box via direct message. And then we'll talk about like how we could get from what they showed us to an answer choice. Also, for stuff like this, I like to try and break everything up individually so that I'm dealing with like X and Y and like the numbers, for example, 8 and 4, like all separately. Because if it's multiplication, you're allowed to break it up. So you could have cube root of 8 times cube root of x to the 8th times cube root y to the 6th. Same thing on the bottom. So hopefully this helps a lot of you get started. And then once you have an answer, just send it in the chat box and we'll keep going. All right. All right, so I see a few answers. Afzel, do you want to explain like how you got to your answer?
Sure. So what I did was I first split up the numerator into things that could be cubed by 3. So I got the cube root of 8 x to the power 6 y to the power 6 times the cube root of x squared.
Right. I'm just gonna, for this purpose, I'm just gonna split up this one. So we'd have cube root of x to the 6th times cube root of x squared. So very similarly. Yep. And
Yeah.
then what did you do?
It's simplified down to 2x squared y squared times cube root of x squared over 2xy cubed.
Yep.
So then I just simplified it further and I got my final answer of x times the cube root of x squared over y.
Yeah, exactly. Because the 2's will cancel. 2 divided by 2 is just 1. X squared divided by x, we end up with x in the numerator. Y squared over y cubed, we're getting y in the denominator. And then that square root, well, cube root, sorry, of x squared, we can't do anything with that. If any of these, like using radicals and simplifying those types of expressions, is something that's difficult for you, I like to think about it how we talked about yesterday. Also, for example, x to the 8th to the cubed root can be rewritten as x to the 8th to the 1/3. So in this case, again, you're still gonna have to think about it as splitting it up to be things that you could take the cubed root of, and that just means like this needed to be divisible by 6 and divisible by 3 in order for us to do that. That's why we split it up to be x to the 6, x squared. Does anyone have any questions about why our answer for this would be B? Or like how we're able to simplify some of those expressions? Okay, so if no one has any questions, we'll move on. We'll keep going. If anyone does have any questions, you can always just, take yourself off mute, ask. It's totally fine. There's no stupid questions. I know if you're sitting there and you don't understand something, someone else on this call definitely also doesn't understand it. So we just want to ask if we're confused. Everything's fine. We're gonna skip over that one. This one I just want to quickly talk about because I want to get to more of the questions that are towards the end. For what value of x is the expression 5 over 6 minus 2x undefined? Like what makes an expression undefined? Okay, I'm getting some answers that are correct. Yep, a lot of people are saying it in the chat box. A function will be undefined if we have 0 as our denominator. So in no circumstance do we want 0 to be like our denominator when we're looking at any type of like function that looks like this. So undefined means the denominator would have been 0, which we don't want. We do not want our denominator ever really to be 0. Okay. Why is this not zooming out? Okay. Quadratic and exponential word problems. So I just put these in here. I believe if you guys are in the in-person class, we have done these ones before, but let's just take a look at this one, the exponential one, because I'm pretty sure I have some quadratic word problems towards the end. So this one is saying it's a function g. It gives the number of green algae growing in a beaker. T is representing the amount of time in hours since the algae were placed in the beaker. What amount of time in hours is needed for the number of green algae in the beaker to double? So whenever we're thinking about exponential, they're typically written like this. So it's like f of t, because usually we're thinking about it as time. F of t is equal to your initial amount times whatever like factor. Usually if we're increasing, it's 1 plus like the rate as a percentage to some power time. And like this is just representing like the total amount, like once we plug in for t. Worst comes to worst, like for example, I'm not always the biggest fan of exponential functions. I don't love them. I don't love seeing them. But we can always just plug in our answer choices and see what makes the most sense, right? We know what our initial amount is based on the way the formula is written. We could just plug in values of t until we see that it doubles. All right, so I have a few answers, and by a few I mean 3. They're all right, but if anyone wants to put in any last minute guesses, then we can talk about this one. All right. Does anyone else want to explain like how they got to their answer? The correct answer is C. So if you were thinking it's C, like, can anyone explain like how they would get that as their answer? Yeah. Yeah, Afsel, you can answer.
Okay. Basically, it's just asking for the time it needs to double, and since t is being divided by 2 already, we just need the it to be raised to the first power. So it would be, because it's already doubling the parentheses. So if you put 2 in, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that would be the answer.
Yeah, exactly. So in the parentheses, it's times 2. So that would mean something's, oh yeah, Stephen responded in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, so the 2 means it's doubling. We need the power to be to the power of 1 in order to, stay just doubling. We want it to be multiplied by 2 to the first. So t over 2 is equal to 1. We solve for t using this. We're going to get t is equal to 2. If, for example, let's say, I don't know, we get to the test, I hate exponentials. Like, I don't understand what they're really asking me to do. For this to double, it has to be 20,000, right? To go from 10,000 to 20,000. You could then just go ahead and solve this for t. You divide by 20,000, you're getting 2 is equal to 2 to the t over 2. And again, you just solve for t over 2. Some graphing concepts that we're quickly going to go through. Big differences are exponential and linear. They'll do a lot of word problems where they ask you, okay, is this increasing linear? Is this increasing exponential? Is this decreasing like linear or decreasing exponential? So they'll give you word problems. They'll expect you to know that. They'll show you like equations for exponentials and expect you to understand and pull out which one from like the graph choices. Most of these are concepts you guys have probably seen in algebra or algebra 2. So for the most part today, we're just going to be reviewing questions that look similar kind of to what you guys have been doing like in school in math class. I'm going to skip this one so that we can use one of the questions at the end instead. This is just an example of power and things like that. So a question could show you this graph, right? And then they'd expect you to be able to rewrite the equation like, something squared, something, etc., with all the factors. So let's take a look at this one. If I had to write out what I think the equation would be using the x-intercepts or the roots, how would I do that? Yeah, so we'd be multiplying the roots by each other is what someone said. So we'd have to decide, like, is it going to be like x plus 3, x minus 3, etc. So if this is going through at -3, what would our factor be? And anyone who knows it, you could just shout it out or put it in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing it from 3 people in the chat. So the factor for this would be x plus 3. Would this be to the first power or the second power? And how would we know? Yeah, so I'm seeing it in the chat box. It would be first power because it goes through. So whenever like the line for the function goes through the x-axis, it's going to be to an odd power. So in this case, it would most likely be to the first. And that's what they like answer choices would be. Like they wouldn't really have anything that's cubed on the SAT. So it would be x plus 3 to the first. Then we'd have this factor right here. So this one would be x minus 2. Would this one be to the first or would it be squared? Like, would it be an odd power or an even power that we're expecting to see on the x minus 2 factor? All right, yes, I'm getting a bunch of correct answers on this. It's going to be even. Most likely it's going to be squared, for the purpose of the SAT. They're not getting super duper like complicated with this. It's either going to be the first power or the second, most likely. So since it bounces back, it's going to be an even power. And then our last factor is this one right here. What would this be? And what power would it be? All right, yes, I'm seeing a few answers for this. X minus 5 and to the first power because it's going through the axis. So everyone who's responding, good job. Seems like we're understanding this concept. You guys have probably seen this a lot in Algebra 2. But yeah, so they would just have a bunch of answer choices. You know, one of them would probably have x minus 3. You know, it would be flipped because they love to do this to try and trick everyone. You know if it's odd or even power by the behavior of the line. So the line, or like the function, you know, the graph, if it goes through the axis, it's odd, crosses. It's an even power if it bounces back like into the same quadrant. Like if it's negative, we wouldn't know specifically like if it's first power, like third power. We just know it's odd or even, but most likely on the test, like on the SAT, they're not going to be giving you things that are like to the fourth or to the third. There's ways to tell, but most likely on a test like this, we are not going past the second power when we're just looking at a root, like it's crossing. This is just another image to remind us of our different graphing behaviors when we see like an ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this case, if a is greater than 0, like the number that's usually attached to x squared, there should have been it should be ax squared. I know it doesn't show that right there. If a is greater than 0, it opens upwards. If a is less than 0, it opens downwards. Our parabola. Another thing to note is on the test, sometimes they'll have it written like this. There could be an a out here plus k. What is this formula or like form that I just wrote? I know that ax squared plus bx plus c is usually standard form. What is this? All right, we're getting a bunch of responses. Vertex form. Yeah. So this form, really easy for us to tell, okay, my vertex is going to be at HK. This form is also very easy for us to move the graph if we need to. Like if they tell us there's a transformation, it's easier to add the transformations to the graph that's already in vertex form. One thing to note about that formula is that on the SAT, what they'll typically do is they'll give you something in ax squared plus bx plus c, and then they'll say which of the equivalent forms shows the maximum or the minimum, and then they'll have like A, B, C, D as their answer choices. So if they want to see the maximum or the minimum like as a part of the formula, that just means they want you to transform this to be in vertex form. Sometimes it's super easy, like that type of question, because only one of them is in the correct vertex form. Like sometimes it'll be in factored form. That doesn't work for us. That's something to be aware of. They might want us to just rewrite something as vertex form or rewrite it as factored form. Just to practice with our vertex form real quick, like which of the following shows the graph of this equation? And this one's not really meant to be a real trick question. On the test, I would have expected them to have two that have the same vertex, and then, you know, it's supposed to like shrink because it's 2 in front. But we're getting a lot of the correct answer so far. So if this is the vertex form, what is our vertex? Like, what are we expecting our vertex to be? Like, what are the coordinates? Yeah, -1, -5. So if this is the case, only one of them has that as our vertex. So we'd have to go with A, which is what a lot of you guys were choosing already. Okay. We'll skip this for right now. We'll move on to some more questions, and then I'll save more time for questions at the end of today than I did last time. All right, some practice problems. This function f is defined by f of x is equal to 8 root x. Let me just draw that out a little bit more. For what value of x does f of x equal 48? All right, we're getting a lot of the correct answer on this one. so far. I'll give you guys like 1 more minute to try and set this one up, solve. All right. Amy, could you explain how you got like to your answer?
So, I did 48 equals 8 and then squared root of x. And I divided 8 on both sides. And I squared to 6 and x is equal to 36.
Yeah, so we just square both sides to get rid of that square root. We're getting C. Yeah, this was pretty straightforward, just demonstrating how, we'd plug in with our radicals. This wasn't really even like exponent rules, but just simple like solving, making sure we understand that. All right, next question. They're giving us y equals x squared minus 14x plus 22. The given equation relates the variables x and y. For what value of x does the value of y reach its minimum? What is like that question really asking us? Like in terms of like a graph or in terms of like solving? Like what does that mean? Like reaching a minimum. Yeah, Steven, you're right. Vertex. So when they're asking about this, we're asking about vertex. Yep, lowest point on the graph. So once you guys have a value for x, put it in the chat box, and then we'll talk about, there's 2 different ways we could solve for this. One of them I think is faster than the other, but we'll discuss. All right, so let's start talking about this one. There's definitely a bunch of algebraic ways that we could solve and find out what x is when y reaches its minimum. So again, they're just talking about like the coordinates of the vertex, but more specifically, they're asking like where it occurs, not what it is. Like we don't need to know y, we just need to know x. So if we really wanted to, and this was our math test for our algebra class, your teacher would probably want you to do completing the square, turn this into vertex form, find the y value, all that kind of stuff. We only need to know x. What is our formula to solve for x, like of the vertex? How do we find that? Like axis of symmetry, what's that formula? Yes, I'm seeing it in the chat. It is x is equal to negative b over 2a. So most of the time, a is going to be 1, so we don't have to worry about it too much. But yeah, it's going to be negative b over 2a. So in this case, if we did this algebraically, if we remembered that formula, this is very quick, very easy. We're plugging in negative 14 and then dividing by 2 times 1. We're getting 7 as our x value. Let's say we get to the test, we forget. We don't remember that formula. We don't really remember, our parabola rules, let's just say. We can always go to Desmos. It's going to be that window on your test screen. Y is equal to x squared minus 14x plus 22. So now is when we just need to understand our graphing concepts. We're finding the minimum. We know the minimum is the vertex. It happens right here. X is equal to 7. And that would be our answer. Something with this that like trips people up is they'll choose the y value by accident. So just being careful choosing x when they're asking for x and that kind of stuff. All right. Let's use this one. So now we're jumping into another word problem that's dealing with exponential growth. And of course, they love doing ones that have to do with bacteria and growing bacterial. And this is very similar to the one we talked about before. Okay, let's do another example that's similar to this. I have to share to a different screen. So this one, very similar to the last one. If it's doubling you know, we just want this exponent to equal 1. If that's the case, we just want 410 over 410. So our time would be equal to 410. Let's take a look at this one. So this is on the paper practice SAT 2, module 2. This question 17, I want us to take a look at right now. They're giving us this function. It models the number of coupons the company sent to their customers at the end of each year. T represents the number of years since the end of 1998. And T is going to be between 0 and 5. If it's graphed in the TY plane, which of the following is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph in this context? So this is like understanding that algebraic equation, but now applying it to, you know, a real world concept. So I'll let you guys read through those answer choices, and then when you think you have one, put it in the chat. All right, so we're getting a lot of the same answer. A lot of people are saying D, that's correct. Sometimes, you know, the question's gonna be harder than other times. It depends on like the answer choices. A and B are not really describing what a y-intercept is. So, you know, they were, I don't know, those answer choices wouldn't really make sense. The y-intercept in this case would be when t is equal to 0, and when t is equal to 0, we get 8,000. So that's the number of coupons when t is 0, and when t is 0, that's the end of 1998. So that's why D is our best answer choice for a question like this. I'm gonna share back to the PowerPoint. All right, so this is again another kind of word problem-ish. So trying to decide, is it decreasing, is it increasing, is it exponential, is it linear? And this one might be a little tricky, so take your time with coming up with an answer. Because just because it's a percent doesn't automatically mean something's exponential. All right, we definitely have some varying answers on this one. Our answer is actually going to be D. I know a lot of people were between C and D. Our answer is going to be D. And this is because I know it's a percent, and usually we're trained. We're saying, okay, percent means exponential. Not always. So if it's 201% of X, that means you're multiplying X by 2.01 every single time. No matter what X is, you're just multiplying it by 2.01 every single time. So it's not like whatever the new value of X is, that's what it has to do with the next one. So if it's just 201% of X, this would be our function that we're dealing with. That's why it would be D rather than C for something like this. So when we are dealing with percent, we just want to make sure, okay, is it just, you know, increasing the same amount every single time? Yes. Or is it like different? So that's why it would be increasing linear for this, which, you know, seems kind of weird, but that would be the answer for this one. This one, we're taking a look at a graph. They're giving us a rational function, a over x plus b, where a and b are constants. They show us part of this graph, and then of course, because it's the new SAT and we have access to Desmos, they love doing these graph transformations. They're saying g of x is equal to f of x plus 4. Which equation could define function g? So the one that is drawn is f of x. So let's just write that out for ourselves. And let's start taking a look at this problem. Try to think about what we were talking about before with like what makes something undefined, thinking about those asymptotes. And also, if it's easier for you, something I would probably try to do is plugging it into Desmos to see, like, does this look like what I think it is? Like if I think B is equal to blah, 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 like let me see if that's what it looks like in Desmos. Or like, let's try to think about it this way. Which ones do we think we could probably eliminate? Or like if I had to eliminate one of these answer choices, which one would you guys want to eliminate? Okay. I'm seeing someone say D is completely wrong. I would agree with that, like it doesn't make sense for it to be that because they're saying f of x originally should be a over x plus b. So why would there be that whole x plus 4 up there? That wouldn't make any sense. All right. And honestly, if I'm looking at these answer choices, it's kind of helping me to realize. So Steven's asking, where does 6 come from? Good question. I think it has to do with the way that the function is growing, like it's being multiplied by 6. But what that's also telling me is since it's in every single answer choice, A has to be 6, right? Because it's in every single answer choice. So that's basically telling me A is 6. So based on the function that they're showing me, like this one, f of x, 6, it would be 6 over x plus what? Or x minus what? What do we think it would be based on like what that asymptote looks like? It looks like there's an asymptote here. Yeah, currently the graph looks like it would be 6 over x plus 4. Yeah, because it's at the asymptote's at -4, so it would be x plus 4. So now they're saying g of x is f of x plus 4, right? So if I plugged in x plus 4, that's changing my answer choice to be what? Yeah, x plus 8. So just algebraically, if we plugged in, x is equal to x plus 4, that would have transformed it to give us c. But also, if it's plus 4, it moves it in the negative direction. Yeah, the asymptote is always like a key part of the denominator. So your vertical asymptote has to do with the denominator. So we're moving for that direction based on the fact that it's plus 4. I know this one is like extremely tricky. So if anyone has any questions on this one, you can always shoot me an email about it, but I just want to keep going. I think we have like 1 or 2 questions left. But let me just see which one would probably be best. Let's use this one rather than the other one, just to be our last question for today before you guys have some English if you're staying on. So 2 variables x and y are related such that for each increase of 1 in the value of x, the value of y increases by a factor of 4. When x is equal to 0, y is equal to 200, which equation represents this relationship? All right, so I'm seeing a few of the same answer, but I just want to quickly go over this one before we're going to have to hop off. So some key things here, even if I don't really understand what they're saying when they say like the value of y is increasing by a factor of 4, let's say that's something that's like, confusing me in my head for some reason. Like I don't know what they mean by that. I can always start off with my x equals 0 and y equals 200. So these two, if I plug in x equals 0, I'm getting 0. 0 to any power is going to be 0. These will give me 0 if I plug in x as 0. The other two, that's when I want to plug in x equals 0, and anything to the 0 power is equal to what? Yeah, 1. So if I put this to the 0 power, I'm getting 4 times 1. That's not exactly what we wanted. We wanted 200. This one, if we put something to the 0 power, we're getting 200 times 1. This is exactly what we wanted to see. So even if we didn't understand what the factor of 4 was really talking about, we could have gotten to our answer by process of elimination. Factor of 4 just means, okay, the first time they're multiplying by 4, then they're multiplying by 4 squared, then they're multiplying by 4 cubed. So that's basically all they're trying to get at with the factor of 4. If anybody has any questions, again, you can always shoot me an email, Marley at Wagner Prep. We'll be back again tomorrow, 4 to 5 o'clock. We're doing problem solving and data analysis. We have a bunch of practice questions with that. If anybody has any questions, again, shoot me an email. I can always share all these PowerPoints with you guys. But if not, I think Lily's probably here to take over for English.
Yeah. Hi, Molly.
Hey.